Hi everyone, welcome to Electric Car Australia, the Aussie EV and Sustainable Living YouTube channel. My name's Greg and today we're going to have a look at the electric vehicle incentives across every state and territory in Australia. We'll also have a quick look at a couple of initiatives the federal government's got, and of course it wouldn't be a discussion without having a look at the EV disincentive or the EV road user tax that we've got here in one of the states in Australia. We're the only country in the world with that, so at the end of the video we'll have a look at that. So firstly, if you're a regular visitor, thanks very much for your support. We really appreciate it. At the end of the video, we'll show you a new piece of kit that's just arrived that your support's helped us buy, which is great. If you're new to the channel, please click that subscribe button. Also give the video a thumbs up if you like it. Share it with your mates and don't forget to leave some comments. We really like to see everyone's comments and we reply to as many of those as possible. So when we started to research for this video, it's actually quite difficult. Each state and territory is slightly different. While there's some similarities, there is also differences. So this video's general advice only. Will include all the links to each state and territory's dedicated EV incentive information. So please go and check that out for your specific state where you're living. And to also make it a little bit easier, we'll pop the timestamps up there for each state. So we'd love you to watch the entire video. That helps the YouTube algorithms. But if you don't have time to do that, we'll pop those timestamps up and you can just zoom straight through to the approximate section where your state is and just watch that part. So let's kick off with Queensland, my home state. So the Queensland government's calling their EV incentives the Queensland New Zero Emission Vehicle Strategy 2022. So this is part of an overall package of incentives. The key one, I guess, is the $3,000 rebate off the new price of a EV. Now this is for zero emission vehicles only, so obviously no tailpipe emissions whatsoever. And it applies up to a value of $58,000 including GST, and that's off the dutiable value. So we'll go into that a little bit more shortly, but basically that's the value of the car that you pay stamp duty on when you buy a new car. Now the key thing for this is that also includes any accessories you add to the car. So if you're getting ceramic paint protection or you're getting fancy wheels and all these sorts of things, all those things add on to that dutiable value. So that means you need to be very careful that if you're buying a lower priced EV and you start adding things on, that you don't push that price over the $58,000, because then you won't be applicable for the $3,000 rebate. So really something to keep in mind. The dutiable value does not include rego and stamp duty, but it does include all those other things, accessories, dealer delivery fees and all that sort of stuff. So just be aware of that one. It applies only to battery electric passenger and light commercial vehicles. It doesn't apply to hybrids or plug-in electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles I should say. It doesn't apply to second-hand vehicles, retrofitted zero-emission vehicles, so if you've got a conversion, it doesn't apply to that. It doesn't apply to dealer demonstration models, so it must be a brand new car off the lot. Obviously not heavy vehicles, not e-mobility scooters, doesn't apply to boats or marine vessels, and any vehicle that's previously received a EV grant or subsidy in any other state in Australia. Now I just quickly went through those because some of the other states are very similar or different. So they're the criteria basically that aren't included. It must be a 100% battery electric vehicle and it must be brand new. Now the Queensland scheme's only recently been announced, so there's a little bit of information that's not available on the website, so we've been told that it is to come. But basically the rebate's applicable to any vehicles that were purchased from the 16th of March 2022 onwards. You can't claim it until 1 July 2022, so what you need to do is keep your invoice for your car, and once they open the claim system you will be able to claim it, but you will need obviously evidence of the purchase, and the easiest thing to do that is via the invoice. Other than that, we don't have any other information on how you'll be able to claim it, etc. The website, that will include a link in the show notes, just says that more information is to follow. So another incentive available in Queensland is discounted registration and stamp duty costs. So you'll get about a 1/3 discount on stamp duty. So for a $50,000 car, you'll pay about $1,000 in stamp duty on a hybrid and a 100% electric, compared to $1,500 for a 4-cylinder car. So it's about a $500 saving. But this is where it gets tricky, because on the stamp duty discount you can have a hybrid, whereas on the purchase rebate you cannot have a hybrid. So you do need to look at the fine print with these things. So with regards to the registration, you'll get about 10% discount on your registration. So electric vehicles, 100% electric vehicles in Queensland are classified as a 1 to 3 cylinder vehicle, and believe it or not, that also includes steam engines. So those vehicle classes will get about a 10% discount. Hybrids aren't included in that, because hybrids are likely to have a 4-cylinder engine, the mild hybrids or the plug-in hybrids, so therefore they wouldn't get the rego discount. So again, it's even different again, so you do need to check the fine print. Public charging, the Queensland Government's also putting some money in there to encourage EV uptake, so there's $10 million in co-funding being put to the industry and local government to install additional public charging infrastructure, and more details are coming on that. So businesses and local governments will be able to apply for that after July 2022. And also the government fleet is an area they're looking at, so they're expecting 288 EVs in the government fleet by the end of 2022. Now that's an important step, because government fleets and large business fleets, in the next 2 or 3 years after the purchase, that will flow into the used car market. So very important that government and big business get fleets going, because that'll help our used EV market. And disincentives in Queensland, to date there's none. I believe the Queensland Government have ruled them out in the medium term, but we'll have a look at that with the other states. Okay, so let's head down the east coast of Australia to New South Wales. Now, New South Wales is a really important state for EV uptake in Australia, because it's got the highest number of vehicles registered. There's just under 5.9 million passenger vehicles registered in New South Wales. That's a huge amount of vehicles. So the more of those we can transition to EV, the better. And keep in mind, currently in Australia, we've got less than 2% of vehicles are EV. So that's actually embarrassing. So we really need to get that number up. So New South Wales is really important to doing that. Their initiatives are wrapped up under the 2019 Electric and Hybrid Vehicle Plan. Now, their signature policy is a $3,000 rebate off the purchase price of new battery electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles as well. And that's off a purchase price or a dutiful value up to $68,750, including GST. So again, that value is calculated the same as Queensland, so be careful that you don't load up with accessories and dealer delivery charges and all that sort of stuff and push it over that threshold. It's not available for any type of hybrid, so plug-in hybrid or mild hybrid. And as we mentioned, calculations on the purchase price very similar to Queensland. Rebate started for EVs registered from 1 September 2021, so this policy's been in place for a little while, and it's limited to 25,000 vehicles. Now, I should have mentioned the Queensland initiative never mentions a vehicle limit, so I'm assuming Queensland's going to release that when they put out further information, because obviously there'll be some sort of limit. Don't know what it is for Queensland yet, but New South Wales is committed to giving a $3,000 rebate on 25,000 vehicles. You must be a New South Wales resident and use your EV for private use. If you're a business and you've got less than 9 vehicles in your fleet, you can also claim the rebate. If you've got more than 10 vehicles in your fleet, there's a special incentive for you guys, and that's called the New South Wales EV Fleet Incentive. And again, you can follow the links in the show notes and go and get some more information on that. You'll need to claim the rebate online after purchase. So you've got to stump up the cash, buy the car, and then go through, let's call it the rigmarole of an online application after to get your rebate back. New South Wales are also providing a stamp duty rebate, and interestingly, this is on EVs up to $78,000. Why they just don't make it the same as the rate to claim the rebate, it's at $68,750 $100,000 value car, the stamp duty is on $78,000. This is why it's complicated, so please check your relevant state and really get into the details. Great to know that they do have a rebate. Again, you submit your applications online after the fact, and the same eligibility criteria as I mentioned above. Another initiative that the New South Wales government is rolling out is faster commute times. So for a limited time, they're going to allow 100% battery electric vehicles travel in T2 and T3 transit lanes. So look, that'll be great if you live in Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong, those metropolitan areas with a lot of traffic. Won't be much help if you live in a regional area. Public charging also, they're tipping 171 million into ultra-fast charging stations between 2021 and 2025. So they're the really high-powered ones, so the 250 to 350 kilowatt chargers. So if you've got a budget EV like my little MG ZS, cannot use those sorts of charge capacities. The fastest we can charge at is 75 kilowatts. So it helps out because there's more chargers around. But that really high capacity and the cost of that, I would have suggested it'd be better off, and you get better bang for your buck putting in more chargers, cheaper, lower powered chargers, than the higher value, more expensive ones. Anyway, that's the decision that New South Wales is running with. The government fleet, they're looking to transition that to all battery electrics by 2030. So good on them for that. It'll be interesting to see how they go. And that's really important because, again, that helps out the second-hand market a couple of years later. Let's talk disincentives. So New South Wales has mentioned they are going to bring in a road user tax for electric vehicles, unfortunately. I guess the small benefit is it's not coming in until 1st of July 2027. And they've levied that 2.5 cents per kilometre will be charged on those. Or it could also come in when there's 30% of new vehicles, whichever happens first. So 30% of new vehicles being EV, or 1 July 2027, whichever one we hit first, that's when it'll come in. So as I mentioned, we'll talk a lot more about this towards the end of the video, because I think it is something that people are very interested in. It's a very topical conversation, and I'd really like to get your comments. So again, keep in mind, guys, this is general information. Please go to the links for your specific states and do a bit more research on all the ins and outs, because there is a lot of selection criteria and ways you claim your rebates. If you'd like some personalised one-on-one advice and you've got some specific questions for us, anything to do with EVs, living with an EV, EV infrastructure, charging, that sort of stuff, please visit our website. We'll include the link below, and sessions for that start from only $50. Okay, let's travel a little further down the coast and have a look at Victoria. So their initiatives are wrapped up under the Supercharging Our Zero Emissions Vehicle Future Roadmap. And again, the signature policy is a $3,000 rebate off the purchase price. I don't know where this $3,000 number come up, but all the states have chosen it. So somebody's done some numbers and thought that that was the best way to go. We're not clear on how many vehicles in total this will be for, and we'll talk about that a little bit more shortly. But it is for brand new battery electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. So again, the same as New South Wales. Purchase price up to $68,740, including GST. So that's the dutiable value. That's calculated the same as Queensland and New South Wales. So watch those accessories. It's not available on any type of hybrid vehicle. Rebates started for EVs registered from the 2nd of May 2021. So again, this one's been around for a little while. Now they say it's limited to a total of 20,000 vehicle applications in total. But what they've done is they broke that up into smaller releases. So the first release, they had 4,000 vehicles. That's all been used up. So they've released a second number of 2,600 vehicles. Call me a little bit cynical, but I'm interested to know why they're doing it in releases. I'm thinking at some point they might drop the value of the rebate. So for instance, once we get up to 10,000 vehicles, they might drop the rebate to 2,000. Maybe not, but just something to keep an eye on. At the moment, it's still $3,000 per vehicle. until that current release of 2,600 vehicles is extinguished. You must be a New South Wales resident, and if you are, you can register and claim 1 EV under the rebate. If you're a business, you can claim up to 2 EV rebates, which is great. And it automatically appears off your dealer invoice. So that's a fantastic thing. So hats off for Victoria for making it really easy for the end user and consumer. So the dealer organises all the rebate and claiming it back. You see it straight off your invoice. So that means you don't have to stump up the cash and then wait, let's say 6 or 8 weeks to get it back. So great idea. Good on you, Victoria, for that one. Also offering a rego discount, so $100 off for battery electrics and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles from 1 July 2021. So again, this one does apply to plug-in hybrids, whereas the rebate doesn't. And it doesn't apply for motorbikes, unfortunately, and it automatically appears off your rego bill again. So you don't need to go and claim it back, it just is taken off. There's no luxury vehicle rate of stamp duty payable. So this applies to higher value EVs. So if you've got an EV over 68,740, the stamp duty stays at that level. So if you buy a $200,000 EV, you'll still only pay the stamp duty applicable on the cheaper one. So only going to be of value to people buying higher, more expensive EVs, but it does help. Public charging is another area. So Victorian government, like most governments, is putting in some money to public charging. $19 million to accelerate the rollout of EV charging infrastructure across regional Victoria and support charging EV fleets. So that one's interesting. They've made it that it's going to be out of the metropolitan areas on some of those regional highways. So great to see that. The government fleet also, they've put $10 million up to replace 400 vehicles in the Victorian government fleet. So the sooner they can roll that out, the better. Current supply chain constraints will obviously slow that down a little bit. Now, unfortunately, Victoria was the first jurisdiction in the world to roll out a road user tax for EVs. I mentioned before, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but they have rolled it out. It is in place now. It's 2.5 cents per kilometre for EVs, and it's 2 cents per kilometre for plug-in hybrid EVs. And that started in 1 July 2021, so last year. So we're nearly coming up to the first anniversary of that. And it'll be indexed annually. So again, this is interesting, isn't it? The EV road tax will be indexed to CPI each year, but the rebates won't, and the stamp duty rebates and things won't. So that's disappointing. So let's talk a little bit more about that later. So are you guys hanging in there? There's quite a bit to get through with this. So if you're still with us, thanks for that. I had to go away and have a snack. As you can see out the window, it's raining here again in Brisbane. This is coming into the second week of rain we've had. Our regular viewers will know that we are getting a pool installed, and they came, dug the hole on Monday, and we've pretty much had rain ever since, so they haven't been back, and that was a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, when it's rainy and wet and overcast and a bit cool, as most of us, I tend to eat a bit more, so I had to go and have a snack. So let's get back into it. We're going to have a look at Tasmania. And Tasmania is a little bit light on in the incentives. They do have some, but definitely not as glamorous as the other states. So Tasmania just has simply called theirs supporting electric vehicle uptake. There's no purchase rebates available in Tasmania, unfortunately. There's no registration discounts for individuals or the majority of businesses. But interestingly, if you're a rental car company or a tour bus company, they will give you a registration waiver for 2 years, and that finishes on the 30th of June 2023. So pretty much just over a year of that one to go. So you're in luck if you're a rental company or a tour bus operator. You can get a discount on your rego or no rego, but that's pretty much it. Stamp duty exemptions for the purchase of new or second-hand battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell vehicles for 2-year period. And again, that ends on 30 June 2023. So get in quick if you're thinking of getting an EV. charging. So there's a grant scheme called the Charge Smart Grants Program. They've allocated $600,000 towards that, and they're providing grants of up to $50,000 for organisations towards the cost of purchase and install of DC electric vehicle smart chargers for public charging. And there's also grants up to $2,500 for organisations to fund AC destination chargers. So they're your smaller 7 or 22 kilowatt chargers at motels, shopping centres, that sort of stuff. The government fleet, they've committed to transitioning 100% of the government fleet to electric by 2030, so good to see that. And there's no disincentives, thank goodness, in Tasmania at the moment, but they're monitoring what other states are doing, so watch this space. So moving around to South Australia now, they're calling theirs South Australia's Electric Vehicle Action Plan, so nice snazzy name there. The $3,000 purchase price rebate is back in South Australia. That's available on new battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, so very similar to New South Wales. Due to full value up to $68,750, including GST. It's not available on any type of hybrid vehicle. The rebate started for EVs registered from 28 October 2021, so late last year this one kicked off. It's limited to only 7,000 vehicles in applications, so it's a lot smaller, whereas New South Wales were looking at 25,000, I think. Here in South Australia we're down to only 7,000. The rebate, applies after your purchase, so you need to stump up the cash, buy the car and then apply for the rebate later on. It's the same as Victoria. Residents can claim 1 EV rebate, and if you're a South Australian registered business you can claim up to 2 rebates. Now the registration initiative, a little bit different in South Australia. They're giving you free rego for 3 years, so that's equivalent to about $138 discount in years 21-22. Now I should mention before that when we say registration discounts or rebates, that's only off the registration component. So as you know, you've got other vehicle charges, taxes, you've got insurance, CTP, that sort of stuff on your registration. So when they go free registration, that's the state government registration charge. It's not free insurance and everything else. So generally here in Queensland, that's about 50% of the cost of your total registration fee. So I guess you save about 50% off the cost of your annual registration if you're in South Australia, and that's for 3 years. Again, it applies to battery electric and fuel cell vehicles up to the value of $68,750. So they've kept the value of that initiative exactly the same as the value for the rebate. The free rego offer application period is from 28 October 2021 to 30 June 2025. EVs registered between this period will receive the full 3 years of free rego. There's no limit on the number of EVs which individuals or businesses can register under this scheme, so unlike the rebate, this one's unlimited. So South Australia is one of the only states that's also got some initiatives for home charging. So if you've seen some of our other videos where we go through whether you actually need to install a home charger or not, because not everybody needs one. A lot of people can just plug into a normal power point and charge their EVs. But if you do need a home charger for convenience or speed, it's great to see South Australia have got some subsidies for that. So they're offering 7,500 subsidies of up to $2,000 for households installing EV smart home charging systems. So keep in mind that's for a smart system that detects your loads and all that sort of thing. So it's not just a dumb charger that you plug in, turn it on and it maxes 100% charge, away you go. This is a smart system. So they're a little bit more expensive, but they're well worth it. And you claim back the rebate after you install it. So again, stump up the cash first and then put your application in and get the subsidy. Public charging, they've also committed to $12.4 million of expenditure via grants to the RAA, which is the automotive group in South Australia, to construct and operate Australia's first statewide electric vehicle rapid charging network. Adds to the $25 million of private investment. So they're also expecting some private investors and businesses to put some money in, and the government will also tip some in. So that's a great way to do it, because everybody's sharing the cost. The government fleet, South Australia is transitioning its government fleet of 6,800 vehicles to electric. As of October last year, so October 2021, they had 56% of their vehicles in the passenger and light commercial fleet were classed as low emission vehicles, with 27% of the fleet being hybrid and 1% as plug-in electrics. So again, there's a little bit rubbery around those figures. It's great to see they've got some initiatives in place, but we'd really like to see those 100% battery electric vehicles rather than these mild hybrids or plug-in hybrids. But again, good to see the fleet transitioning over. Now, disincentive. Again, South Australia's mentioned that they are going to introduce one. Same as New South Wales, it's going to kick in on the 1st of July 2027, or when registrations reach 30%. The cost will be the same as the other states as well, at 2.5 cents per kilometre for EVs and 2 cents per kilometre for plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. So look, if you live in New South Wales and South Australia, the quicker you buy an EV and get it on the road, the more you'll be contributing to a cleaner and more healthy environment, but also you'll be saving on fuel costs. So if and when those road user charges kick in, you've already had a couple of years of savings to go towards that. So now moving on to Western Australia. So this is, I guess, the state that's had the newest initiatives just released in the last couple of weeks, and it's called the Clean Energy Car Fund. They're giving $3,500 rebates off the purchase price of a new battery electric vehicle or hydrogen vehicle. So slightly higher than the other states. And the value of the dutiful value of those vehicles where you can apply is up to $70,000, including GST. So again, that value is slightly higher over in WA. Not available for any type of hybrid. It's very similar to the Victorian and New South Wales schemes. The rebate's claimable from the 10th of May 2022, so already underway. However, you can't claim your payments back until 1 July 2022. So similar to Queensland, they've announced the initiative. Anyone that's bought a car after the 10th of May can claim it. However, they just haven't got all the systems and processes in place, so you'll need to hold off claiming your money back until after 1 July. And it's limited to a total of 10,000 vehicle applications. So at the lower end of the scale, but hey, 10,000 is better than nothing. There's no rego or stamp duty discounts in WA, so they're off the table. There is some support for EV charging and network support. There's various initiatives being worked on at the moment to align Western Australia's electricity grid with opportunities and challenges EVs pose. So there's nothing specifically been announced that I could find. However, the difference with the Western Australian initiative appears that it is going to be more linked to assisting managing the demand on the grid and stabilising the grid. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in that space. So it is an important space, so keep an eye out on what comes out of that. As for charging infrastructure itself, there is $10 million worth of grants of up to 50% for the cost of installing EV charging infrastructure for small businesses and not-for-profits, so that's great to see. And speaking of that, I've got it on the screen there. We're a member of Carina, and I've mentioned this before in other videos. Carina are a not-for-profit, and they provide interest-free loans to other not-for-profits and community groups to transition their fleet to EVs, install solar panels, basically do anything that moves towards a more sustainable energy system. So check out Carina's website. I'll put the link below. And if you're part of a community group or you know a not-for-profit that would benefit from that, please check them out. There's also $5 million of grants of up to 50% being given to councils to install chargers, so that's great to see. That's generally in regional areas, so that's a big help to those regional areas and those councils to help get some charging infrastructure in. $4 million for charger installs, trials at 4 train stations, so that will also be good. I'm assuming that'll be around metropolitan Perth. And $2.9 million to install a total of 8 new chargers across 4 remote locations on the national highway to fill gaps. The government fleet also, they're aiming to have 25% of the government fleet EV by 2025-26 financial year. However, that does exclude a lot of the fleet. So that's only passenger vehicles and small light commercials. So within that 25%, they're not including large SUVs and that sort of stuff. So again, a little bit rubbery on the numbers there, but it's good to see them making the move. A disincentive, again, we've got that road user charge. So that'll be introduced, distance-based road user charge, again in 1st of July 2027. Cost will be the same as the other states, 2.5 cents per kilometre for EVs and 2 cents for plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And again, it'll be indexed to inflation, so it'll go up every year. So heading up to the top end, the Northern Territory are calling their initiatives the EV Strategy and Implementation Plan. Now, there's no rebates off the purchase price in the Northern Territory, but they do have free rego for EVs between July 2022 and July 2027. So remember, that's only the state or the territory registration charges. You'll still need to pay your insurance, etc. But that is a good discount for those first few years. There's also a decent stamp duty discount, $1,500 off the price of new and used EVs, again between those same years of July 2022 and July 2027. So that is a bonus that it's off second-hand EVs as well. EV charging network and support. So the government's looking to install 400 EV chargers across the Northern Territory government buildings. Now, I'm unsure whether they're going to be available to the public, because the Queensland government also have some EV chargers at some of their locations, but they're not open to the public. While the number looks good, 400, if they're not open to the public, doesn't really help us as EV drivers. There is some other grants for charging, though, being developed as part of the planning for future charging and grid infrastructure. So it sounds like that's a little bit like the Western Australia plan, where they realise they need to have some integration and some smarts with the grid. So they're obviously still working through that. There hasn't been any announcements as yet. The government fleet as well, they're looking to have 200 EVs in the government fleet by the end of 2030. Disincentives, there's none as yet, but they're considering options. So believe me, these few states that don't have these road user charges for EVs, they will be watching with interest on how it goes in the other states. So we're in the home straight now, and we're going to go all the way back down to the ACT, so Australia's Capital Territory. Now, the ACT was one of the first governments in Australia to actively start supporting EVs, and this was way back in 2014. So while their initiatives may not seem that groundbreaking, they have been doing them for a number of years. So that overall assistance that they've started off years ago has certainly had a compounding effect on EVs, which is great to see. So look, there's no purchase price rebates currently in the ACT. They do give you 2 years of free registration for new and second-hand electric vehicles, and interestingly, that includes grey imports. So we won't go into that in this video. We will have a separate video on that in the future, but basically a grey import is a vehicle that's not necessarily sold retail in the Australian market. So there's companies like the Good Car Co, where you can buy an imported Japanese or UK electric vehicle. They'll organise it, or they'll bring it into Australia. So good to see that that is available on those grey imports as well. It's claimable from the 24th of May 2021 until 30 June 2024. So there is a time limit on those free registration. And it again only applies to the territory's registration costs, not insurances, levies and all that other stuff. They have some stamp duty discounts, also great to see. Full exemption from stamp duty on new vehicles, including dealer demonstrators. And that's for vehicles that emit up to 130 grams of CO2 per kilometre. So again, this is a little bit technical, so it's a low emissions vehicle. So it doesn't need to be a zero emission. It can be like a plug-in hybrid or a hybrid. There's no limit to the dollar value of the cars. They've also got a sustainable homes initiative, which is related to EVs. They're providing interest-free loans of up to $15,000 for sustainable products for people's private homes. And that includes new and used zero emission vehicles and home EV chargers. So while it's not a rebate, you can get an interest-free loan to buy an EV or put a charger on your house or something. So I think that's a really valuable initiative to have, and $15,000 does go a long way to helping with that upfront cost. Public EV charging. Support to install 50 EV chargers for public use. The government fleet, they're establishing a fleet advisory service to support businesses and community groups transition to EVs. So this is a government-funded advisory group which will be assisting business council, that sort of stuff. So again, I think that's really important that businesses have an independent sort of body that they can go to and get some true advice, similar to the service we offer our clients for, like I said, that one-on-one advice. All newly leased ACT government vehicles will be zero emission vehicles since 2021. So 100% zero emission vehicles since last year. But again, that's on leased vehicles. So there might be a little bit of wriggle room in there for vehicles that they've purchased. But again, they've made the initiative, they're working towards it, which is great to see. And currently there's no disincentives. So also good to see, and let's hope they don't come in at this point. So finally, let's talk federal government. Now, we're in an election weekend here in Australia, so within 48 hours we could have a totally new government, and we hopefully would have some better incentives than these ones. But currently we've got a coalition government, and they've introduced reasonably recently a future fuel strategy. Now that was putting some dollars towards smart home charging, hydrogen refueling infrastructure and fast charging infrastructure in metropolitan and regional areas. We won't go into the details, but fair to say that was providing some money to build some charging infrastructure, which was great, and we have started to see some of those chargers pop up in service stations and tourist destinations, that sort of stuff. The luxury car tax, if you're buying an expensive EV, it'll be $10,000 higher, the value of the vehicle, before you pay that tax. The tax won't kick in until $79,000 of value, whereas if you're buying a petrol or diesel vehicle, you'll pay luxury car tax from $69,000 of vehicle value. We've also got a disincentive from the federal government. Now this is an indirect one, but it is also very important. So we're one of the only OECD countries in the world that doesn't have mandatory vehicle emissions standards, which is quite shameful actually. So let's hope that does change in the near future. But because of that, EV manufacturers don't prioritise Australia, so they put all their new models into other countries. As everyone will know, vehicle supply is very constrained at the moment. So again, they're putting those EVs into countries that have mandatory vehicle emission standards. So Australia's missing out. We've got less models, less number of cars. Really disappointing on the EV space, and even petrol and diesel cars, we're getting the dirtiest, oldest technology vehicles. And JetCharge had a good article on their website, and we'll put a link in the show notes, that it's cost Australians an extra $1 billion in wasted additional fuel that we've had to purchase over the last few years. Because our vehicles are 50% higher in emissions and consumption of fuel than Japanese, 45% more than the EU, and even 20% more than the US. So as I mentioned, really shameful stuff. We need to get on board, and we need to have emissions standards for our vehicles at least as good, if not better, than other OECD countries. Okay, so let's now talk about the EV disincentive, or that road user tax that Victoria has already introduced and some of the other states in Australia are looking at. So just on the Victorian tax, we've got a High Court challenge currently underway, and if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, I'll put a link in the show notes. But basically, Chris Vanderstock and Kathleen Davies, two EV owners in Victoria, are taking the state government to the High Court. So it'll be interesting to see the outcome of that one. And I know a lot of the other states and territories are closely watching how that court challenge works as well. But look, one of the primary concerns I guess EV drivers have got, myself included, is that this is just a brand new state tax that's come out of nowhere. The excuse is that it's to replace the lost tax from fuel excise that EVs obviously don't pay, and that fuel tax excise goes to the roads maintenance and construction and all that sort of stuff. But as most people all know, fuel tax is a federal government tax. It's not a state tax. And also the federal fuel tax goes into consolidated revenue, and only a very small part of it goes into road funding. So it's disingenuous to say that because EV drivers aren't paying fuel tax, they're not contributing to the roads. That's just purely incorrect. And I've never met any EV drivers, myself included, who don't support paying for the roads. We obviously are road users and we're quite happy to pay our fair share towards the build and upkeep of bridges and roads and that sort of stuff. But this is just the wrong way to go about it. And as we mentioned, Victoria is the first jurisdiction in the world to introduce this tax. And we mentioned that less than 2% of vehicles registered in Australia are EVs. When we look overseas, the US has 3% of vehicles and they don't have this tax. Western Europe has 11% of vehicles EV and they don't have the tax. In Norway, so Norway's the global leader in electric vehicles, they've got 83% of registrations now are 100% battery electric vehicles. So they don't muck around with plug-in hybrids and that sort of stuff. These are 100% battery electric vehicles. They've got 83% of their vehicles on the road now. And of course, we're just talking about passenger vehicles here and light commercials. And they are just starting to look at a road user tax. So they've waited until they've got 80% of the vehicles in that space before they look at it. Here we are looking at it when we've got less than 2%. So absolutely crazy. The other concern is that roads are paid for by the federal government, the state governments, and also local governments. So councils pay for lots of roads and bridges and that sort of stuff out of ratepayers' money. So are we saying that councils should start to look at taxing landholders on the number of driveways they have entering their properties or things like that? Which would be absolutely crazy. So again, this is an ill thought out tax. It's been brought in way too soon. And a much better way to do it would be to get together with the three levels of government here in Australia, federal, state and local, put their heads together, sit down and say, how can we review the entire road user system and rebuild it from the ground up? And I'd argue that the easiest way to do that is have a road user tax for all vehicles. And the more you drive your vehicle on the road, similar to fuel taxes, the more you pay. And also what we need to include in there now with the zero emission technology vehicles is that the more polluting your vehicle is, the more you pay. So these are the sorts of things that should be debated and talked about instead of just introducing a brand new tax, which it's already been proven in Victoria is actually going to cost more to implement and maintain and collect than it is actually going to make money for the state. So they're actually going to lose money collecting and introducing this tax for the next few years, which is absolutely crazy. So another thing I just wanted to mention is that road fuel taxes have been dropping for years. So as cars have become more and more efficient, so over the last 10 or 15 years, everyone will know that new cars are becoming more efficient. They're using less fuel per kilometre. So again, that revenue's been dropping for years, but it's interesting, up until EVs came along, there was no discussion to increase the fuel tax or do anything with it. Soon as EVs come along, they look like the easy target, so we'll put a tax on those, which was very disappointing. So the final thing I wanted to mention about those federal taxes is that when you buy an EV, it's usually or always more expensive than buying an equivalent petrol or diesel car up front. So when we bought our MG ZS EV, it was nearly double the price of buying a petrol one. So that meant we paid additional GST on the day we took delivery. And that worked out at about $1,800 more GST than if we had bought the equivalent petrol model. So if you work that through, we've paid 3, 4, 5 years worth of equivalent fuel tax upfront in advance. So again, I'd argue that that's already been paid. So I was interested to do some hypothetical numbers on this, and I probably should have done it on Victoria because Victoria already has this tax implemented, but I had a look at New South Wales because, as I mentioned, New South Wales has the highest number of registrations. So what I'd done was I worked out if 30% of the vehicles registered on the road based on the 2020 passenger and light commercial vehicle kilometre stats were EVs, the government would have raised 566 million. So that comes from 30% of the vehicles on the road being EVs, travelling the average number of annual kilometres based on the 2020 numbers. They would have raised 566 million in tax. In 2022, the New South Wales government spent around 830 million on road maintenance and funding. So on those numbers, that means that 53.5% of the funding for the roads would be coming from 30% of the vehicles. Now again, these are just rubbery numbers, but these are numbers based on the 2.5 cents a kilometre travelled by an EV for 12 months if 30% of them are registered. So straight up, that is unfair because over half the funding is coming from only 30%. And keep in mind, these EVs don't produce pollution, so they're zero emission at the tailpipe. So the state government is going to be saving a lot of money on asthma treatments and all those respiratory problems and stuff in their state health systems, yet you're slugging the very vehicles that are saving you that money, you're slugging them additional taxes. And the final big kicker, and I've mentioned this multiple times before in our videos, the main reason we bought a EV was that we can charge it 100% from our solar. So it's 100% renewable energy fuel. It's pollution free. We're not contributing to our overseas debt. We're not contributing into importing fossil fuels and all the additional emissions that come with that. So we should be supporting EVs and not taxing them additionally. So that's it. I'll get off my soapbox and my bit of a rant there. They're my opinions. So really look forward to your comments and expressions in the show notes. We'll try to respond to as many of them as possible. But as I said, there's got to be a better way to do this for all drivers, not just EVs. So really happy to hear your thoughts. So look, some general closing notes. You'll notice we didn't talk about hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Again, personal opinion, but I don't think hydrogen fuel cell is suited to small passenger electric vehicles. They're much better suited to big industrial uses, so we didn't go into that at all. The targets the governments have for the number of EVs on the road by certain dates, as we mentioned before, they're a little bit rubbery. All sorts of things are going to impact that, so I'd take those with a bit of a grain of salt. There's some other innovation funds for commercial vehicles to move to EVs and all that sort of stuff. Some studies happening, but really they're small potatoes in the overall scheme of things. Public charger install grants. Now, we didn't mention throughout the video, but the concern with grants for installing EVs, and this is really starting to come to the fore now where we don't have spare parts, and particularly here in Queensland and northern New South Wales, we've had a lot of flooding recently. EV drivers will know that there's a lot of fast chargers out of action, and some of these have been out of action for months. So while it's really great to see governments giving money and grants to install chargers and purchase chargers, we need to be aware about the ongoing maintenance and support of these chargers, because it's one thing to put the charger in, but if it's not supported, we've had numerous ones here in Queensland go underwater. Obviously they're out of action. Once they go underwater, the spare parts and support isn't here to get them back on the road. So just something to be considerate of. But look, there is lots of positives going on. The states and territories are leading the way. As we mentioned, the federal government, and here I've got a little one back from ice skating. As we mentioned, the federal government have been a bit slack in this area, but it's really good to see that state governments have been picking up the act. High fuel prices recently are also going to really push people more towards EVs once supply chains pick up and we can actually start getting some EV stock into Australia. So look, that's it for the video. It has been quite long. There has been quite a lot in it, so I hope you guys have got something out of it and it's helped. As I mentioned, click those links and check out your own state details. And as promised, we're really looking forward to getting this little baby underway. So this is something that our supporters and our generous donations have been able to let us buy. This video, you'll notice outside that the sun has now gone down and we're dark. We've had to record this video over 4 separate sessions because the GoPro keeps overheating. GoPros are a great little camera, but they're definitely not designed for this sort of filming. So hence we've now bought the 4K camcorder, and once I learn how to use that, we'll be using that moving forward. So that'll make it a lot easier for me to make good quality videos that I hope you guys enjoy. And of course, we've got all the other bits and pieces. So once you change cameras, you need to change stands, filters, leads, all that sort of stuff. So we're working on getting all that as well. And talking about supply chains, that camera took us 3 months to get. So it's not only EVs and petrol and diesel vehicles, there's any sort of vehicles that have electronics in them are taking a very long time to get. So thanks again, really appreciate your support. Like we said, please like the video if you found it helpful. Make sure you're a subscriber and you've clicked that subscribe button, and we really look forward to bringing you guys more EV and sustainable videos in the near future. Thanks for watching. Cheers.